Hello friends, Nayaswami Hriman here. It's Friday, February 5th. I'm in the Ananda community in beautiful Linwood. And today with the Rubaiyat, we are on stanza 11, probably the most famous stanza of the Rubaiyat. And it's rich with meaning as well. So I'm going to read it, and then I'll have Swami Kriyananda sing it, and he'll give us Yogananda's paraphrase. Here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness, and wilderness is paradise enow.
Stanza 11. Here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough, a flask of wine, a book of verse, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness, and wilderness is paradise enow. Paraphrase. Withdraw your life force into the center of the tree of life, the spine, and bask there in the cool shade of inner peace. As the sensory tumult dies away, drink the wine of bliss from the flask of your devotion. Commune inwardly with your divine beloved. And in stillness, listen. For the singing blessedness will satisfy your every heart's desire, and entertain you forever with melodies of perfect wisdom.
Well, this beautiful quatrain, so easily misunderstood, a loaf of bread beneath a tree, a flask of wine, and my beloved, thee. Nonetheless, there is a very deep spiritual meaning contained in this quatrain, verse 11. Swamiji gives for us Yogananda's interpretation that this is the state of meditation. But you know, there are different levels of meaning here, and we'll explore maybe one or two of them. In the explanation that Yogananda gives, and in the expanded meaning as he puts it, you know, we have seen during this year of COVID that many people have lost jobs, and thankfully many of those have received unemployment benefits, so they weren't out on the street or starving. But what a lot of people have found is that the period of break, the period of pause, staying at home, sheltering in place, in many cases not having a job, and in some cases working from home, perhaps with reduced hours. Many people, millions, got a taste of a greater level of calmness and simplicity. I think many people have been reassessing their former hectic lifestyles of commuting perhaps an hour each way, 2 hours a day on the road maybe, fighting the traffic, so-called, and, parking, going up into offices, all that kind of thing, hectic deadlines. Many people, I think, have enjoyed, those who didn't get the virus, of course, or have friends or loved ones who did and even died from it. But many people, many more people at least, had an opportunity to slow down. And I don't know if they smelled any roses. They probably smelled the coffee anyway. I did. So that experience, what we're talking about, this imagery of being out in nature, having a picnic, with your spouse, your partner, let's say. If you take the imagery on a on its most superficial level, the meaning is there too, which is stop and smell the coffee. The roses. Meaning our lives should be more balanced. And in so-called modern life, and in, I think, well, a lot of countries, but certainly we think of the Western countries still, some of us, are just too busy. And on the most superficial level, then, this quatrain is a reminder to enjoy life, okay? The simple pleasures of life. We're not talking about hedonistic pleasures, even though people have interpreted this poem in that direction. But in other words, the quatrain holds value even on its surface. But it also holds value on another level, also quite pertinent to what we've been experiencing this last year, which is whether a loss of job, change of circumstances, and so forth. You can feel bereft. You can feel a sense of loss. In fact, what Yogananda says is the term wilderness, beside me singing in the wilderness, always has a, change, in other words. The way Yogananda put it in his other writings, he said, change is destructive to you and I, but it's not destructive to God, because in infinity, it all balances to zero. In infinity, it's all just perfect. And so we often resist or feel confused by, saddened by a sense of loss from change, especially dramatic change. It can be, as all too common, a divorce. It can be a change in your health, a sickness, and a long period of recovery. It can be, in this case, what I'm talking about is a loss of a job or even a career when entire industries disappear. Just think of the folks in the restaurant and hospitality industries during this period of time. Now, these things will bounce back. Some of the restaurants have been very creative in responding to the limitations. Many more have closed, and yet others have opened. So this period of tumult and turbulence and change and loss also offers opportunities for entire new industries, opportunities for people to think creatively about how to support themselves, creatively about new services and things to offer people. But here, what we're talking about in this quatrain is not necessarily just new opportunities to do the same thing. This quatrain is specifically focused on the importance of simplicity in one's way of life. Simplicity needs to be sustained, and by simplicity we don't necessarily mean going off the grid or being bombed back into the Stone Age in terms of how we live and where we live and how we function. Fortunately for us in the 21st century, our technology provides many choices. You can now, we realize, work from home. People did before, but it wasn't necessarily completely acceptable. So simplicity, you see, is the theme. Now the deeper part, of course, which in the paraphrase, Swami wrote Yogananda's words, withdraw your life force from the center of the tree. This is really the yogic interpretation of the loaf of bread. I'm going to turn to the part when he gives the keys of meaning. Bread, he says, Yogananda writes, symbolizes the life force or the energy in the body. This energy can be stimulated through spiritual breathing exercises, which you and I probably know more as pranayama, and many of us know to be the advanced technique that Yogananda brought, which is Kriya Yoga. So when he says, here with a loaf of bread beneath the bough is the spinal tree of life. It's called the Ashwatha tree in Sanskrit in the yogic traditions. The tree of life, of course, is mentioned many times throughout the Old and the New Testament. The tree, if you look at the body or draw a picture of the body and nervous system, the hair and the brain, thousand-petaled, it's like you take a tree, plant it in the ground with all the roots, and with the branches coming up, and you pull it out of the ground, turn it upside down, and the roots are like the hair, like the vibrations and energy of the brain. And the limbs, which are now upside down, coming down, are not just the limbs of the physical body, but more importantly, the nervous system, the way it spreads out from its central channel in the spinal cord. And so beneath the bough is to live and withdraw beneath the bough of the upturned roots of the tree of life, especially beneath the bough at the cranial center, at the thousand-petaled lotus. And that loaf of bread then is the energy, the astral, intelligent, vital life force energy beneath this bough. The flask of wine, he says, is not what it seems to be, but is the wine of God intoxication. Wine in the symbolism of poetry, spiritual poetry, always refers to intoxication with the beloved, intoxication in the bliss of the soul. It's that upliftment and that vibrant. Jesus said, "I came to bring life that you may have it more abundantly." That abundance is the deep in meditation, you may be deeply calm in terms of the body, nervous system, and the heart rate and the breath, but internally you feel incredibly alive, vibrant with energy, vibrant with joy, vibrant in a level of wakefulness that far surpasses the ordinary consciousness with which we walk around the room or drive a car or sit at the computer or talk with other people. It's a vibrant form of wakefulness. The singing is of course, the communion with the inspiration and the wisdom that flows through us in those vital states of upliftment. But he does admit that the wilderness is what we have to go through when we turn our backs on the desires and fears of the ego and the physical body and of the world around us. It is commonly reported, and people are warned who come on the spiritual path, that as you turn your back on ordinary worldly pursuits and pleasures and so on, you will feel a sense of loss at first, because those things you have dropped from your activity and your desires and your thoughts, hopefully. But in that dropping, there is a sense of loss before there's a give up, Lahiri Mahashai said, and then there's a take up. The give up is what we leave behind. And sometimes this includes what were formerly our erstwhile friends. Maybe drinking buddies is the common imagery used, but, people who gossip and just, have a worldly consciousness, talk about money and sex and romance and I don't know, all that stuff. The weather. I like to talk about the weather, so we'll exclude that. I'm not into sports, but some people are. Those are fine for just passing the day, but the spiritually minded aspirant turns his or her back on these things as being meaningful. They might be ways to connect with people, I suppose, but they're not deeply meaningful. In any case, there is a sense of loss. That's the wilderness. But just as in the wilderness, you have the beauties of nature, just as in a desert even, you have in the springtime of our spiritual awakening, the beautiful desert plants. And just as we think of a desert as lifeless, but if you sit there long enough, you see lots of life, plants and animals and, yes, snakes and, all sorts of cool things. It's just filled with life, okay? The beautiful desert plant blossom in the springtime of our spiritual awakening. And so he also goes, he goes back to a reassurance, which is also appropriate when a reassurance to those who maybe have lost their reputation through mistakes they have made, sense of loss. A more common one would be a divorce or breakup of a long-standing partnership. Whenever we experience loss, precipitated maybe by illness and the need to recover, he says, take heart, because in that wilderness, hope can also spring eternally. Enjoy, people have experienced actually many times during recovery of illness that there's a certain simplicity that comes with, just having to rest and recover. There's kind of even amidst a certain amount of pain, there's a calm joy that can be experienced. In any case, to take heart that in times of change, whether voluntary or involuntary, whether painful emotionally or physically, that this is the stripping away, this is the power of the god Shiva, clearing the deck for new life, for new hope, for new beginnings, for new opportunities. And so it is, though, on the deepest level, that which resists being still to know, that which resists our twice daily meditation, this is the ego and the subconscious fighting for control. You've got to know what you're up against. It's deeply embedded to maintain its self-definition. But death hovers always, 24/7, as the ultimate taker of those attributes to which we are so attached. And so that's the deepest wilderness. And the dark night of the soul, which comes to us every time we resist meditation, but that's a superficial level. The deepest dark night is just before the light dawns of enlightenment. And we need to prepare ourselves for that, just as we prepare ourselves for death by every time we meditate and strive to meditate deeply. We withdraw into the wilderness of non-identification, into the wilderness of non-ego identity. And so in the greatest dark night, we have to face what appears to be the eradication, the dissolution, the oblivion of consciousness. But it's not true. But in that wilderness, we don't know that. And we can talk about it all day. But the reality facing that wilderness is real. And that's where courage and faith, the faith born of actual daily meditation and experience, and for many people, the faith born of having to go through outward trials and losses, as I've already spoken of, that can give us faith in ourselves, but also faith from where the power really comes from where life really comes. So this is a beautiful verse. It is a reminder of simple living. It is a reminder of the simplicity of spirit that lies within us, that shall make us free. Okay? I think I've gone into overtime. They're going to fire me. All right. Well,